Today's reading is on Barnosky's Establishing Common Ground. And in a sense, establishing common ground is a bit of a misleading word, because I think after reading this thing, it's more like about effective communication, and you'll see. So climate change here they have this hook at the start where climate change at this point of time is still not a major issue perceived by many people around the world, especially the Barnosky took USA as an example, where where 60% of people does not think that climate change is a serious problem, and furthermore, like more than 1/3 of people haven't even heard of it. So yeah, 35%. But there is still ways. Barnosky is quite optimistic that there are still ways to prevent things from becoming worse, and where people can't climb out of it. So what we can do, he suggested from the very beginning, that we shall focus on framing the appropriate information for the appropriate audiences appropriately. That's one way. There are 3 other ways, which are integrating education of climate change to all levels, creating venues to develop recognition, dialogue, and action, communicating the actionable solutions, and telling people that actionable solutions exist and are actually feasible. So, in the introduction, Barnosky took an example, which is from President Johnson, the 35th or 32nd president of the United States, I forgot, where he said, where he pointed out climate change as an issue like 50 years ago already, but 50 years now, it's only getting worse. And why is that? He suggested three most essential reasons. One of them is complexities in science, economic, and political interests. The other one is human tendencies to focus on immediate problems instead of looking at further ones, which is one of those thinking blunders, but during this recording I forgot the name. And the last one, which is the most important one, and also the one that this whole reading is based on, is climate change issues are not communicated properly. So there are actually some keynotes on global climate change awareness, where, for example, developing countries have only 35% of the population actually knowing about climate change, or have actually heard about climate change, which is bad, very bad. And the education level is more or less very correlated to the climate change awareness, which means in theory, the more educated you are, the more likely that you will know and you'll act for climate change. The third one is people in developing countries who are aware of climate change sees climate change with a higher risk of harming people in the future than those of the developed countries, which is which when we talk about it, it's very bad for the developed countries, because they should be the ones who know more about it, but they aren't doing enough. So the fourth one is people generally see climate change is of greater risk when they actually acknowledge that it causes harm to humans, which in a sense it's common sense, but then when you think about it, there is like 60% of people thinking that climate change is not a problem. Then that is very bad, considering this is a very small portion of people only. And the fifth one is communication about climate change must be tailored to different groups. And why is that? Because a study from Yale, actually, the reading stated, a study from Yale they have divided people into 6 categories regarding climate change awareness, which are alarmed, concerned, cautious, disengaged, doubtful, and dismissive. Which, when we see, it's this part is most concerned and this part is least concerned. And around here, 60% of the people in this study is are very likely to be swayed by what they are communicated with. For example, the news or their friends or authorities. These can sway people, and how we present information to them will really make the difference whether they will go this side or this. And of course we want them to go this side, but in case there are like wrong or in case there are inaccurate information, then they might just go the other way, and which will only make the whole issue of climate change awareness especially even worse. So they also took an example where the general public has 20% of altruists, and freeriders, which are basically not swayable, and 60% of conditional cooperators. So it echoes with the Yale study, but since the majority of human beings are by scientifically proven easily swayed. But 1/3 of them, as I wrote, fail to recognize that humans cause climate change, and that only less than half of them think that climate change requires quick action or immediate action, or they simply don't have that awareness of why we need to face climate change. So a provided reason by Barnosky is that it's a result from disconnection of public perception and reality, which is, in a sense, yes, that's correct. Well, there are 5 key communication pathways suggested by Barnosky where they are the most effective and most important ways to communicate information about climate disruption, or in a way climate change. So the first one, let's take a look like this. The first one is journalism, and the problem of journalism is they don't focus much on climate change, because journalists and editors always prefer to have more eye-catching news instead of in terms of so that they can boost those readerships, where so they will always they often put those environmental and climate change issues news aside, because they aren't always that big in many ways. So a way to improve it, I suggest, is, and Barnosky, I agree, and Barnosky suggested that we have to properly phrase pieces of information with some hints of apocalyptic aftermath in order to capture people's attention, because people are tended to receive and to be alert of bad news more than good news. The second one is digital media, which is significant because it's becoming the most important communication method through time. It's becoming more of it now, and therefore utilizing it is beneficial because, for example, taken from the reading again, Facebook has actually changed its energy policy after Greenpeace posting a whole non-coal campaign through Facebook, and that way it shows that it's actually working in making a big corporate work. So in a way, us as individuals will tend to choose to move with Facebook as well. The scientists are another big group because people often trust scientists even more than family and friends. That's what Barnosky said. I do agree, because we can't trust, well, it's authority basically, but there is a problem because scientists won't often make statements until they are and two things are actually proven. So they always show doubts, and people will never get used to doubts. They prefer things that are certain, spoon fed into their mouths, and but when they are if certain of some facts, then they are very effective communication methods in a way. Education plays another big role because everyone has to go through education, but the problem is it doesn't have education around the world, especially in USA, where by the way, this passage takes USA as an example. They don't have a formal structure of climate change education, and the way to sort of fix it or sort of improve the situation is to have more contact between for people in education of contents from climate change, including images, arts, performances, and like basically integrating it into their daily education. For example, showing TED Talk videos. I always watch them. For some reason I like them. And the last one is special interest groups, which are the rest, basically green groups, political groups, anti-climate change groups. They are basically the ones, the biggest group, as far as I understand, the biggest group that can actually sway the 60% here, because they consist of an assortment of different people of different stances, and people, when they mix things up, then they'll get confused, and which may or may not be good. So yeah, that part we have to fix. And yeah, so it is very important to do framing, because framing is particularly effective, quoted, as a communication tool for drawing attention to, legitimizing, and providing an interpretive context for abstract, complex, or unfamiliar information. So basically, because past communications on climate change have too much emphasis on problems instead of solutions, so people won't see hope, and they'll just what I understand is they'll just sort of give up, which is not what we want. But even though I said framing is important, it's still very challenging, because people perceive risk when we frame it properly in different ways, like the story of you being in a desert and you having half a cup of water. How would you see it? Would you see it half full or half empty? That's a very different perception already. So that's one challenge, and the other challenge is the very high demand of to understand the target audience, or else we might have simply inaccurate information for the inaccurate audience, which is bad. For example, California, because they are multilingual, having very different, very rich in ethnicity and also religious background, and how we phrase our information, how we present our information is very crucial. So coming to the end, we see some framing examples from religion, politics, and economics and businesses. So what we can conclude from here are climate change beliefs really rely on partisan loyalties, like whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, already makes quite a big difference towards your attitude towards climate change. And also, surprisingly, religious leaders are powerful, because we can see from here 2 billion Christians, 1.5 billion Muslims, 1 billion Hindus, 500 million Buddhists. These are all people divided into religions, and they are, we can see here, motivating actions of 80% people on Earth. So they play an exceptionally important role. The one thing is they traditionally don't have connection between climate change and religious beliefs, but we see in a way nowadays climate change is becoming a bigger thing, since religious leaders and scientists are actually starting to collaborate, and they are proven to be very effective information on explaining the climate change crisis. That's why I like Pope Francis, because that he basically started this all. So it is important to like motivate behavioral change, because we always know that people's opinion does not reflect what they actually do, and changing what they think does not mean changing what they do. So it must be a collective effort at all levels: education, business, governments, etc., to actually make the whole thing work again. And another quote towards the end: if messages are framed inappropriately, people close their ears. And what I add is even worse, it would make them perceive a wrong meaning, and things will not go as what we wanted it to go, and which is very bad. So the final opportunity that Barnosky thinks is that mobile devices with digital tech can be the thing that actually changes us, because we all know that things, even advertisements nowadays, are getting more and more personalized through big data, which is something that we must accept, and it's probably the thing that we can actually work with and make climate change a thing that people always care about. This recommendations is basically from University of California, which are over here. We can see create closer connections between these, and yeah. So that's basically it for my video. You might want to stop here. Yeah, I'm very sorry for not being here this lesson because of my interview. So thank you.